think of food more as a fuel as opposed to something that's going to kill or cause cancer. Because if we can support the processes in your body, if we can encourage better liver function, better kidney function, better muscle formation, better blood sugar balance, better brain power, better happiness, this all comes from food, then that's how we're going to create this environment in the body where cancer doesn't want to be, it doesn't want to stick around, it doesn't get the resources it wants to thrive. And darn, are you ever going to feel better thinking that way as opposed to being afraid of every morsel of food that goes in your mouth, right? Have you ever Googled the best diet for cancer? I'm wondering, what were your answers? I'm guessing that you probably came across plant-based or Mediterranean or alkaline, potentially ketogenic. It can be so confusing, especially when it seems like one diet is completely different than the other diet. Like, how can you be, I don't know, both ketogenic and Mediterranean? How can they both have anti-cancer impacts? Like, how can that be? It is ridiculously overwhelming, to say the least. And the thing is that when it does come down to it, there absolutely is no perfect diet to block cancer, because basically you need to be a factor whenever it comes to choosing the best nutrition for you as well. The reality is that what one article says is the best diet may not be suitable to you because you are very unique. Even if you had the same cancer diagnosis as someone else, the same treatment, whatever nutrition plan is going to suit you is not necessarily the same thing that suited the other person. You have a lot of different things going on than anybody else. You have specific genetics and epigenetics. And if you don't know what I mean by epigenetics, I briefly chatted about that in the last episode. So go take a listen in there. You also have different taste preferences. You have different available time. You have different digestive abilities as well. Like maybe something doesn't sit well in your stomach. Maybe something sits well in your stomach, but it's not good for you as well. You also have different stress levels, basically causing potentially nutrient depletions or other things to go on. You have different exercise habits. You have different recovery processes to go on in your body, different things to mend. And all of this really is what's most important, what's going to make the greatest impact. It's going to influence what makes the greatest impact in choosing the best foods for you. And another part is that we love to categorize things as humans. It helps us to process, to learn, to even research. But when it comes down to it, again, we want to focus on potentially parts of certain diets and what's going on in your body in order to choose foods that are going to work for you. So today, instead of looking at a specific diet plan, because I truly don't believe that there is a one type of diet that's going to block cancer the best, we're going to look at different components that we typically address when it comes to looking at you as an individual and choosing what is the best nutrition plan for you moving forward. Again, it's not a diet. We believe it really depends on so many processes that have to do with you. A big one being like, what do you already eat and what can we slowly do to adjust it, as opposed to throwing you into a plan that is super overwhelming, completely different than what you're used to. We really want to figure out what's going on with you. Where are we starting from? What is all your data points telling us? So are we looking at your blood work, your past medical history, your body composition right now? And then we will apply these nutrition components. So let's go through these components. And I always think that every time I prepare these episode notes, I'm always like, I could totally do a whole episode on just one of these components. And I probably will in the near future. I have so many things I want to cover with you guys. But today I'm just going to outline all of these components. And then I'm going to kind of briefly go through them a little bit. But I know that in the future, I will be doing a full episode on each one of these nutrition components moving forward too. So stick with me here. But very important to know, what are the components anyway to focus on in order to create a diet plan that's going to work best for you. The first component I want to chat about is antioxidants and other phytonutrients. Mainly, these are components that are found in fruits, vegetables, herbs, and spices. So you've probably heard of antioxidants. Antioxidants are these things that go and fight oxidative stress. Oxidative stress being linked to DNA damage and overall cancer growth. And then we've also got phytonutrients. They're like plant nutrients, phyto being PHYTO, so phytonutrients. These are plant compounds. They have protective properties typically. Some fancy names you may have come across would be flavonoids, carotenoids, glucosinolates. I don't even know how to say them exactly properly. They're a mouthful, to say the least, pun intended. There's sulforaphane, there's quercetin, there's polyphenols. All of these are types of phytonutrients, and they all have different ways that they interact in the body to also fight oxidative stress, prevent DNA damage. They have different roles to play. They can everything between the phytonutrients, antioxidants, even the vitamins and minerals that are found in plants, so fruits, vegetables, herbs, and spices, they all have components in them that are going to be good for blocking cancer. So a lot of these will be literally like cancer killing. They cause apoptosis, which is a programmed cell death, meaning just like a neat way, a clean way to kill cancer cells so that they don't damage surrounding tissues. So these components can cause apoptosis or programmed cell death in cancer cells. A lot of these things can also stop cancer cells from growing, so they can arrest the cell cycle is what it's called. So it just makes them kind of put like it's almost like a roadblock in a construction zone where it can't move any further. Maybe the bridge gave out, and then that's what the phytonutrients is it knocks over the bridge so that the cancer can't grow and move any further. It also can prevent a lot of cancer cells from spreading through different mechanisms, as well as getting resources that it wants in order to thrive. The way that these phytonutrients and antioxidants and other compounds in fruits, vegetables, herbs, and spices, the way that they can work is actually by blocking a process called angiogenesis, which is blood vessel growth. So these can block those processes, which prevents the cancer cell from getting the fuel from the blood that it would typically want in order to thrive, as well as to get a transportation pathway through the blood to other areas of the body. So all of these things are very important. The foods that typically contain a lot of these antioxidants, these phytonutrients, these vitamins, and these minerals are the leafy green vegetables, as well as the cruciferous, the stinky vegetables. That would be like your Brussels sprouts, your broccoli, your cauliflower, your cabbage, those nice sulfury smelling ones. In fact, that sulfur smell is a nice component for detoxification in the body. We've also got legumes, which are your beans, your lentils, your chickpeas, and probably a few other things there that we could go through. But basically, we've also got nuts and seeds, but basically these are the really nutrient dense in terms of antioxidants and phytonutrients and vitamins and minerals. And these are the ones that we want to consume the most of in the diet because of their ability to block reactive oxygen species and to prevent DNA damage and cancer growth, cancer spread, and also to potentially kill cancer cells too. So you might know that this is part of a plant-based diet. This is why everyone is researching vegetables and telling you to eat more vegetables is because of these components within these foods. They are very good for killing and blocking cancer cells. I just have to tell you a quick story too, is on a group call yesterday with our flourishers, our clients, there's a question about a specific drink that they wanted me to take a look at. It was basically a fruit drink. So I went in and took a look at it, and on their website, I was trying to see like what are the ingredients, what are the components in it. It's being marketed as an antioxidant drink. And when I looked at it, it was basically just fruit juice. But they had all of these fancy words on there. They said full of polyphenols and antioxidants and just all the fancy words, right? But when it came down to it, I had the conversation with this person that it's really not important to include special things like that fruit juice in your diet plan because the differences that we can get from specifically food are huge. So whenever we're looking at a food and all the nutrients within it, they come in different combinations, for example. So a different combination of phytonutrients. So we know that specifically or especially cruciferous vegetables, they have a lot of miracetin as well as sulforaphane. So sulforaphane, a very nice potent sulfur compound that is anti-cancer. It also requires miracetin in order to be activated, to be stronger, to be in higher amounts whenever you're eating it. So whenever you're having a piece of broccoli, you're getting both miracetin and the sulforaphane, and that's having a great combination effect in your body. Whereas if you're going to have a fruit juice, there probably is going to be a variety in there, but at the same time, it's just not the same as having it from vegetables. So a lot of times people will take the information they learn in research and then be like, oh, well, sulforaphane is super anti-cancer. Let's now put it into a pill form, or let's now put it specifically into a juice form or whatever it might be. And sometimes we do use the pill form of sulforaphane for sure, but it's not quite the same impact as what the research is trying to say when it comes to looking at the human stuff they've done whenever you're eating broccoli. Like, yes, broccoli is good for us, but we can't just strip it down to its sulforaphane. There are other compounds in it. The miracetin and the sulforaphane work together, as well as there's different amounts of each. There's other components, there's other polyphenols, there's other glucosinolates and things like that in that broccoli that are also going to have a beneficial impact on the body. So we can't just go bypass the actual food and try to consume the juices and things like that. That being said, sometimes these things like a sulforaphane pill or a antioxidant rich drink might be beneficial for someone if you are just learning how to eat healthier and you're looking for more nutrient dense foods as you're starting to change your taste buds and your kitchen pantry and all of these cooking techniques and things like that around. Sometimes we do work with people who are potentially still in treatment or they are still having a lot of digestive issues from treatment and it's hard for them to get a lot of certain foods in, whether it's because they can't break down fibers in a lot of fruits or vegetables, or maybe they have a lot of nausea or upset stomach. While we're working on rebuilding their gut lining and improving their nausea and upset stomach, we might encourage something like a greens powder or specific drinks or whatever it might be, pills, in order to improve their healing process, in order to improve their antioxidant support in their body. And then we also have people who are like obviously on the go a lot. They're very busy people and it's hard for them to get nutrient dense meals every single day. So it's kind of like a little bonus for them to have something like this specific juice. Although I wouldn't recommend specific fruit juices in general. I prefer people to potentially just grab some raspberries and take with them, or we'd be looking more at greens powders. So it does make a difference if you're having a lot of these things in powders or pills or juices and things like that compared to getting it from the whole food. There's also the other components like fiber, which helps with blood sugar balance, fiber and things like the other phytonutrients and phytochemicals and stuff. They also help to nourish the gut lining. So there is a difference when it comes down to it between taking a pill, taking a drink, and also eating the whole foods. Like those are all different things. We want to look at combinations. We want to look at different types of phytonutrients in it and the other components that are in it that might not even be phytonutrients, but are also beneficial to the gut, to the overall body. And before I leave this first one here, I just want to touch on what plant-based actually means, because there is a lot of research on a plant-based diet being beneficial. And of course, when we're working with our flourishers, our clients, we are very much encouraging them to eat as many plants as possible because the research is super solid. You can definitely not go wrong by eating vegetables. You might have some side effects or symptoms from eating too many vegetables, too much fiber if your gut's not used to it, but that is addressable. That's something we can change. I don't know if addressable is a word, but it is something that we can change and support. But in general, we want you to eat more plants, but plant-based doesn't actually mean vegan or vegetarian necessarily. It just means plants are a very big foundation of the plate, basically, of what you're eating. So when you hear someone say, yes, we definitely want to do a plant-based diet, which if we were to categorize what we typically encourage for our clients, it would potentially be called plant-based, but doesn't mean vegan, doesn't mean vegetarian, which are totally okay ways to eat as well. It really comes down to just making sure that plants are a big focus on your plate. So don't be scared of that word if we ever throw around plant-based. It's just a way we categorize making sure that plants are at the forefront of our meals. All right. So that was antioxidant / phytonutrient support. That is a big component that we want to have in everyone's nutrition plan whenever it comes to stopping blocking cancer from coming back. The second component, which I feel like is very much skipped by a lot of people, but especially in vegans, vegetarians, which again, it's not a bad diet, but this is something, if you are vegan, if you are vegetarian, I want you to tune in. Keep doing what you're doing. You have your reasons and that's great. But I want you to really know that even if you're vegan, vegetarian, you might not be balancing your blood sugar. And balancing your blood sugar is a key component to reducing your risk of cancer coming back. So for many reasons, some of them being that blood sugar control, whenever we have balanced blood sugar, whenever we have consistent release of energy via the release of sugar in our bodies throughout the day, we're going to have better energy. It's going to make you feel better because low blood sugar can actually make us feel crankier, of course. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely get hangry, which is hungry and angry. So whenever I get hungry, I get angry. It's just something like I almost feel like if I get hungry, I'm always like, I can't stop thinking about anything but food. So having low blood sugar is a part of the reason why I get angry, or part of the reason why I can't stop thinking about food is because that blood sugar has dropped and it's like, feed me now, or we're going to do some damage here. So if you have balanced blood sugar, you have less hangriness, you have a brighter mood, you have more energy, you have less brain fog. And blood sugar can also influence hormone balance when it comes to your sex hormones, like your estrogen, your progesterone, testosterone, all those kind of things as well. So if you have any hormonal issues going on, then balancing blood sugar should be a part of that as well. The other thing is that post-treatment fatigue can be worsened by low blood sugar or just blood sugar dysregulation, and we know that's a common trend when it comes to supporting people post-treatment. Also, a big part here is that cancer survivors are at an increased risk for diabetes and heart disease post-cancer treatment, and blood sugar regulation, of course, plays into diabetes, and blood sugar regulation also plays into cardiovascular disease and heart health. So by helping someone supporting their blood sugar post-treatment, we're going to help them to reduce the risk of cancer, we're going to help them to reduce the risk of diabetes and also of high cholesterol, heart attack, strokes, things like that, right? So why is blood sugar important when it comes to reducing the risk of cancer and helping beyond helping someone to feel better? Well, really, blood sugar spikes can lead to inflammation, and it leads to spikes and inflammation by encouraging oxidative stress, where glucose can actually encourage the production. It can generate free radicals, which go damage cells and damage DNA. Blood sugar spikes also cause these things called advanced glycation end products or AGEs. And this happens whenever sugars will bind to so excess sugars will bind to protein or fats. It'll create these compounds that then activate specific inflammatory pathways, again, leading to chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation is a known cause and a known growth factor whenever it comes to encouraging cancer. The other part of why blood sugar spikes can increase inflammation is because it can actually activate certain immune processes. It can stimulate the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines like IL-6, interleukin 6, which is just like a fancy word for an inflammatory mediator, TNF alpha, CRP. All these things can be influenced and increased when your blood sugar is spiking on a regular basis. So we also find that whenever high blood sugar is in your blood, so when sugar is high in your blood, we also stimulate high insulin. And whenever insulin is high, it then stimulates something called IGF-1, which is insulin-like growth factor 1. And as you can tell by the name, insulin-like growth factor 1, it is a growth factor. And this growth factor in excess, we need a little bit in order to help our cells to grow and develop and be healthy. But too much can be a stimulator of cell proliferation. It can cause these cancer cells to grow, to divide, and we don't want that in cancer, of course. And high IGF-1 also inhibits apoptosis. Again, that programs cell death. We don't want that. We want the cells to be able to die easy, whereas high IGF-1 can discourage these cells from being easily killed, from dying. It can block those pathways and keep them alive for longer than what we would like to see. We can also see that high IGF-1 due to high insulin, which is due to high blood sugar spikes. So high IGF-1 can also feed tumor metabolism, encouraging excessive amounts of sugar to be fed into cancer cells potentially. It's more of a kind of Warburg effect thing. I would say this is a thing that's commonly talked about, although I feel like it's not the biggest concern when it comes to we're talking about all the biochemistry of IGF-1 and cancer cells and things like that, but it's still a factor to consider for sure. So we want to manage blood sugar. We want to have regular blood sugar release. When it comes to managing your blood sugar, we're going to reduce the amount of inflammatory mediators being released. We're going to reduce the amount of reactive oxygen species, the AGEs. And then if we're also managing blood sugar, it's going to not cause insulin to be high, because when insulin's high, that then triggers IGF-1 to be high. And then high IGF-1 then encourages cancer growth, prohibits the cancer cells from dying, and does a bunch of other things as well. So overall, by managing blood sugar, we're going to help to reduce the risk of cancer starting, growing. We're going to help you to feel better. Very important components when it comes to supporting someone post-treatment. So the reason I picked on vegans and vegetarians here is because a lot of vegans and vegetarians, they eat a little bit more of a carb-rich diet because it is a little bit harder to get more protein-rich foods. Not impossible, just a little bit more difficult for sure, especially if you're not used to eating that way. And carb-rich foods eaten in excess can be things that might raise your blood sugar. Of course, if you're aiming a little bit more for the fiber-rich carbs, because fiber is a type of carb, then you're going to do a little bit more justice to your blood sugar. It's going to be much more balanced. But at the same time, we often do have women who are vegan, vegetarian come to work with us, and we get them to track their food for a little bit of time, and we can see that they often just have they basically just don't get enough protein or enough healthy fats in order to balance their blood sugar. And this applies to everyone, whether you're vegan, omnivore, vegetarian, whatever kind of eating pattern you tend to to follow. At each meal, we want you to make sure that you're getting a nice balance of protein, carbs, fats at each meal, even your snacks. So if you're having a handful of raspberries, for example, I would love to see you combine that with a handful of nuts, because the nuts, the seeds, they're going to have some nice oils in it. So that would be your healthy fats. They're also going to have a little bit of protein in there. So if you're having a smoothie, you want to add in some hemp hearts or some protein powder. Maybe you want to add in a half an avocado or even a tablespoon of olive oil, because you're going to get some healthy fats that way. You can add in some ground flax. That's going to give you some fiber. And if you're having maybe your dinner, you're going to have maybe a little bit of rice. Perhaps you can switch that out with some quinoa or some legumes like lentils or anything like that. But you can also have a little bit of rice, as long as you're combining it with some protein and some vegetables, which are going to give you your fiber as well. So having these combinations at each meal is going to help you to balance your blood sugar at each meal, so that you're getting a sustained release of sugar into the blood, so it's not a huge spike. So if you just had some rice, for example, literally rice is mostly all basically sugars, carbohydrates kind of thing, with less fiber in it. So it's going to break down really fast in your body. It's going to absorb really fast into your bloodstream. It's going to spike your sugar into your bloodstream, and it's going to drop really fast. And when you have the drop, you're going to have a low energy, brain fog, things like that. Whenever it's spiking, that's when we're going to stimulate the release of inflammatory factors and insulin and IGF-1 and things like that. So if we can combine rice alongside some fiber and vegetables and some protein, then we are going to have a shorter, like a more sustained, like a slower release of the sugar from the carbohydrates in the rice into the bloodstream, because it's going to be blocked and balanced with the protein, the fiber, those kind of things whenever you're consuming your meal. So you're not going to have a spike. You're going to have a little bit of a increase in your bloodstream, and then it's going to slowly go down over time closer to your next meal. So giving you more sustained energy, not allowing that chronic inflammation to be stimulated from the high blood sugar, and also not allowing the growth factors to be stimulated as well. I tell you, I didn't mean to go that in depth with that, but I just feel like it's so important. I will do a whole other episode on blood sugar and IGF-1 and things like that in the very near future. I also have some information on my blog, on my website, that goes a little bit more into IGF-1 and blood sugar and things like that too. So feel free to check that out. So far we covered antioxidants and phytonutrients. We talked about blood sugar balance. Now let's talk about macronutrient demands, which technically we already talked a little bit about macronutrients, but I want to talk about macronutrient demands, meaning like what is your body demanding in order to function, to heal, to grow, things like that. So let's talk about macronutrients. Let's break it down. Macronutrients are your protein, carbs, and your fat. Protein, very much involved in tissue repair, immune support, muscle, like building muscle, even repairing the gut. Your fats are part of your hormones. It's like your brain loves fats. Fats are also anti-inflammatory. Thinking about omega-3s, they're types of fats that are anti-inflammatory. And we've got carbs. Carbs are very good sources of energy, really good for gut health whenever your carbs are fiber rich, because fiber is like a subcategory of carbohydrates. So these are your macronutrients. And whenever we are building someone up post-treatment, you've either been through surgery or chemo or radiation or immunotherapy or whatever medication you might have had to go on. All of these are having impacts on your tissues, of course, the cancer cells, but also other tissues too. So especially, let's say you had chemotherapy. So chemotherapy, yes, is going to go target the cancer cells, but at the same time, it's not super specific. And a lot of chemotherapies will also target your hair, your skin, your nails, your gut. This is why a lot of people get diarrhea. This is why people lose their hair, is because the chemotherapy is going to target a lot of those other cells too, causing these side effects to happen. So post-treatment, in order to grow your hair back nice and fast and more luscious than ever, in order to help repair from the diarrhea and the gut issues that might have happened as well, phone going off, then we really want to focus in on your protein demands. So we might actually have a higher demand for protein post-treatment because we're working on repairing your gut health and repairing the intestinal lining. We're also going to have higher protein demand because we need to build more hair. So we almost basically have to think of it as in we're replacing what might have been damaged that we actually want to be repaired and actually want to stay there outside of the cancer cells being removed post-chemo. Same thing with radiation. A lot of reasons why you feel so fatigued post-radiation is because there's a lot of tissue changing, a lot of tissue damage, and a lot of tissue repair going on. So we want to make sure that that is being supported with protein. And also, like, we also have to consider fats and carbs. They are energy sources. They are fueling other parts of our body as well. Like I said, the hormones, the brain, very fat rich. We love these fats for those tissues. So really it comes down to what are your demands of the body. Other things to consider when it comes down to what is your balance, like how many protein or how much protein, how much carb, how much fat should you include in your diet. We're looking at how far post-treatment are you? Are you still in treatment or was treatment like yesterday? We're looking at, are you looking to gain or lose weight? We are looking at what are your energy levels right now? If they're really low, then we might need to focus more on healthy fats or carbohydrates or something like that as opposed to protein. But usually protein is probably one of the number one things we're going to look at. We need to see just a bunch of different things, basically. Do you have any other medical conditions like diabetes or heart disease or thyroid or anything like that? This will influence how much protein, carbs, and fats that you should be consuming in your day. Kind of what are the repair processes that need to be going on? What do we need to support in your body? There's a couple things here. I specifically love talking about protein. So, cancer treatment, it very much like many of them, they'll lead to muscle loss, nutrient depletions, whether it's because you were unable to eat appropriately because you're having some upset stomach, or if it's the stress, or if just literally the treatment itself was just kind of eating up a little bit of the muscle. So we definitely want to make sure that people are getting enough protein. There's so much research showing that adequate levels of protein, and we don't need to overdo it, but at least adequate levels of protein is going to support the muscle rebuilding. And the other factor here is that after 30 years old, many women become what's called protein resistant, meaning that it is more difficult for their body to make complete proteins and to build muscle with protein that you're consuming through your diet. So, not only are most women in their 30s when they're diagnosed, or 30s or older when they're diagnosed, but one, cancer treatment already leads to a loss of protein and muscle. And then two, just being over 30 makes it harder for your body to make protein and make muscle. So that means that your protein demands are going to go up much higher in those scenarios for sure. And then, of course, people are under eating. We've got people who are depleting their bodies of certain nutrients. And a lot of this is from a lot of fear around food, which is really unfortunate. I know it's out there, and I know a lot of people are going through this where every morsel of food you put in your mouth, you think, should I do this? Is it safe? Like, is this going to cause cancer to grow? Is this going to cause my body to be healthy? It's a very common thing that we hear when we're working with the women that we work with, that everything they come across is just not clear. They don't feel confident. And the number one, they never want to go through cancer again. So they're doing everything that they possibly can. And your nutrition feels like something you can control pretty fully. It's just a feeling that you can have. Although a lot of the information out there that is fear-based is totally not true. And I want to take a moment to just get you to think a little bit differently here. And this is not going to solve all of your problems with this one thought process, but I think it's pretty powerful, where instead of eating to kill cancer cells, I want you to eat to support your body's recovery and to support the immune system and to support your inflammatory recovery and repair and all those processes. So I want you to think less about killing cancer and more about eating to feel good, to support your organ systems, to just have more energy, to just think of food more as a fuel as opposed to something that's going to kill or cause cancer. Because if we can support the processes in your body, if we can support the processes in your body, if we can encourage better liver function, better kidney function, better muscle formation, better blood sugar balance, better brain power, better happiness, this all comes from food, then that's how we're going to create this environment in the body where cancer doesn't want to be, it doesn't want to stick around, it doesn't get the resources it wants to thrive. And darn, are you ever going to feel better thinking that way as opposed to being afraid of every morsel of food that goes in your mouth, right? So let's change that thought process. It's just one step in many things that we can do in order to feel better post-treatment. So I feel like I talked about that one good. Again, I'm going to cover all of these in more depth in probably upcoming episodes, like one component per podcast. But so far we talked about antioxidants and phytonutrients. We talked about blood sugar balance. We talked about macronutrient demands. And the fourth, and there's a half one that I want to cover, is quality. The quality of food that you're eating, meaning, is it grass-fed? Is it organic? Is it wild caught? Is it dairy free, gluten free? And then the half part is cancer specific foods I'll get into as well. So the reason I'm leaving this one to basically the last point, the end, is because it's actually, despite a lot of hype, it's actually the least important one to focus on when it comes to supporting your body post-treatment. And this is me thinking very holistically. I'm not just saying this because this is exactly what the research says. Oh, I'm just too medically thinking. I am a very holistic professional where I will look at like the how to starve cancer aspects of things. We do consider medications that are meant to starve cancer and stuff like that as well, which we'll do another episode on that soon. It's already in my docket of things I want to cover. But when we focus just on cancer killing food this, cancer causing food that, it must be grass fed, it must be organic, you're missing a lot of pieces of the puzzle that are going to actually create the environment again that's best for your body in order to be strong, in order to be cancer resistant. This is just like such a small piece of the puzzle compared to the other three things I just chatted about. But let's definitely talk about it. I do think it's very, very important. So, we do want to reduce our exposure to environmental contaminants found in a lot of like conventional meats, dairy produce, and the way we can do that is to seek out more grass-fed, organic, wild caught. And the key is to just kind of afford or choose the cleanest quality you can afford because we don't need perfection, but reducing exposure can definitely help. And a reason why is because there's so much going on during treatment. There's so much just going on in our lives in general in the world. It's not the worst world, but it's just not the cleanest a lot of the time. That the more we can do to reduce our exposure to things that might be bogging up a lot of the processes that happen in our body, then the easier our body's going to function, the stronger it's going to be for us. It can focus more on other things like repair and energy and fixing heart health and stuff like that, whatever it needs to focus on, as opposed to worrying about trying to get rid of heavy metals and saturated fat and all these other things that might come in lower quality foods. All right. So the other part why I don't believe this is the number one thing is kind of studied, they've kind of studied the impacts of a lot of non-organic foods and not grass fed and stuff like that. And we haven't seen a huge increase, if any increase, in the incidence of cancer. But the problem with that is that one, we don't 100% know what causes cancer. And if we're looking more on individualized basis as opposed to a general population study, then I would love to be able to get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on with the person in front of me. Not necessarily the general population, because things can even out in a bigger population study. But if I'm looking at you, the person in front of me, I want to know basically what can we do to reduce your environmental contaminant burden. And everyone's kind of toxic bucket, I hate the word toxic, but just easy way to say this is everyone's toxic bucket is filled differently. Their ability to handle toxins, again, I don't like that word, but we're going to use it. Their ability to handle toxins is different. So everyone's toxic bucket, everyone's ability to handle toxins is different. And again, we don't know what causes cancer. So if we can help someone to reduce their exposure overall, perhaps we are making a difference on an individualized level, even if we're not seeing the results in the big population studies. All right. So I hope that makes sense. The kind of take home to that is that the dose makes the poison in terms of a lot of this research on inorganic, kind of contaminated, environmentally contaminated meat and conventional meats and things like that. But we can still be mindful of the exposure. So that was just a quick note on that. I also want to point you towards the EWG's Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 if you haven't already heard of it. It gives you an idea of basically it outlines the 12 kind of least clean foods out there that you might want to consider buying organic because they are a little bit more heavily sprayed with pesticides, things like that. And then also highlights the 15 foods, the clean 15, that are potentially safer to buy not organic in the grocery store, things like that. Especially if you're consuming them more regularly, you probably want to focus on clean 15 and then buying the Dirty Dozen more organic if you can get your hands on that. That's the EWG's Environmental Working Group's Clean 15 Dirty Dozen. And many of you have probably heard of that, but just pointing that out there for in case you haven't. And then also talking about quality, I also lump in here cancer-specific foods. So another thing that people often focus on, and again, it is important, but we really want to focus on the components 1 to 3, antioxidants, phytonutrients. So that's one. We want to focus on blood sugar, and we want to focus on the macronutrients demands of your body first. These are going to really move the needle. And then if we're looking at cancer-specific foods, yes, it's going to help a little bit, but we want to focus on you and your body, not the cancer diagnosis. This is just another piece of the puzzle. So we still work on this. We still are going to talk about it, but I just want you to think about the other ones first, basically. But some of the foods that we really focus in on when working with a breast cancer patient, for example, would be including soy. And I know a lot of you might be questioning a lot about soy. And if that's the case, just send me a message on Instagram and we can have a conversation there. I have a few resources to give to you if you do have any questions on soy. But given the current research that we've got, I find it's very strong in terms of supporting the consumption of soy for people who are going through breast cancer, whether it's hormone responsive or not, i.e., is it ER/PR positive or triple negative, whatever it might be. In general, soy is beneficial for breast cancer survivors. We also focus in on green tea for breast cancer survivors, ground flax. We do focus in on non-fat or limited or no dairy. And we also encourage limit to no alcohol. I'm just going to call myself the messenger on that. Alcohol is not something that we do want to consume when it comes to reducing cancer risk, but I know everyone has their own preferences and journey to go with that. But we do encourage people to consume very, 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 very little to no alcohol in general for all cancer types. And then often we work with a lot of colorectal cancer. Again, there's some research here on legumes. So your lentils, your chickpeas, your beans being very, very, very beneficial for colorectal cancers. We also focus in on mostly calcium-rich vegetables as opposed to dairy. Dairy's not that bad, but again, we are trying to limit it. So we focus in on calcium-rich veggies like broccoli, bok choy, and overall just checking their calcium level on blood work and making sure we get them to track their food over a certain period of time, calculate how much calcium they're typically eating on average, and then if we need to increase their calcium, then we will include a calcium supplement. And the reason we're focusing on calcium is because there's research showing that adequate levels of calcium can reduce certain types of colorectal cancer risk over time for sure. And then we encourage, of course, no processed meats. We look at increasing fiber, green leafy vegetables. These are the ones that have been very much studied for colorectal cancer. And I guess another one that we commonly see and has a pretty decent amount of research on, and in terms of the best foods for it, is cervical cancer. So looking at papaya, so there's been some human research showing that papaya can actually decrease the occurrence of cervical cancer and recurrence of cervical cancer, as well as dark leafy green vegetables, flavonoid-rich foods, i.e. basically just vegetables. All of these, the more you consume them, there has been a direct correlation to decreasing one's risk of getting cervical cancer in the first place or of cervical cancer coming back. So I didn't mention much on other cancer types, and it's probably because there's less research out there. It is because there's less research out there on specific foods for other types of cancers. Mainly, we see that breast cancer or colorectal cancers are the ones that are being studied in nutrition research, and then sometimes cervical. But I would say if we have someone come to us and they have a hormone responsive ovarian cancer, for example, then we would almost treat that as if it were like a breast cancer because the mechanisms by which the foods work in breast cancer are hormonally driven a lot of the time. So it's going to relate very much to like a hormonally driven ovarian cancer. A lot of times it's unfortunate that we just don't have the research out there. So we have to think outside the box and apply certain things to other cancer types that we might have seen in other cancers. All right. So again, just the whole diet pattern matters more than a single food. I don't really want to get you stuck in being afraid of foods because maybe you came across something because it causes cancer, or being really like hardcore sticking to eating a certain food every day because it's been shown to kill cancer cells. Like that might be beneficial, but if it's damaging your mental health, or if it's preventing you from getting variety in your diet as well, that's probably not a good thing. All right. So one thing I wanted to chat about here, I check my notes to see if there's somewhere in particular, but the one thing I wanted to chat about is something that came up, which was asparagine and triple negative breast cancer. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is leading into a common mistake that we see where someone will come across a study, and this study in particular was showing that asparagine-rich foods, which is just like a phytonutrient in vegetables mostly. So asparagine-rich foods have been shown to potentially encourage the growth of triple negative breast cancer cells. So this was a study, and then everyone, whenever the study kind of got into the media, everyone was coming to me and saying, well, I have triple negative breast cancer. Does that mean I should avoid asparagine-rich foods? And in fact, that's not necessarily what this study is telling us. So this study is just one headline, one research paper, and taken singularly is not really meaning a whole lot in the big scheme of things. It's important. It's part of the process of gathering information in order to make an informed decision down the road. And whenever you think about it, asparagine-rich foods is like asparagine is in asparagus, for example. And we know that asparagus is actually good for us. It's a vegetable. We shouldn't be afraid of vegetables. But what this study is really looking at is I believe it was even, I think it might have been mice, not even humans. Might have been cells or mice. I can't remember which. And they're looking more at a mechanism of action, and the mechanism of action in this case is not really going to apply to a human. So their main goal overall is to figure out, is there a drug that we can use to block asparagine in tumor cells in order to block cancer from growing? That's kind of the overarching goal here. And what needs to be done is more human studies, bigger studies on lowering, like taking groups of people with a triple negative breast cancer diagnosis, giving them diets that might be low in asparagine versus just normal asparagine amounts, and seeing, do those people who have diets specifically low in asparagine, do they have less cancer recurrence or cancer growth over time? So those studies still need to be done, and I bet that we probably won't find a big difference when we actually do this in humans. But my big point here is that just reading one study and making a diet decision off of one study is kind of like trying to guess the full image of like 1,000-piece puzzle after you see just one piece. Like that one piece might have a splash of blue or like a line on it, and then you're trying to say, oh, it is obviously a horse jumping over a fence off of one piece of a puzzle in 1,000-piece puzzle. You can't do that. You won't know. So using one study is the same as using one piece of a puzzle in 1,000-piece puzzle. We really need to get all of the data together. We really need to put more pieces together. Even if we got 5, 6, 10 more pieces together, you might have a better idea of what that puzzle is going to look like and can make a better decision there. So never would I look at that one asparagine study and say, absolutely all my triple negative breast cancer clients should stop eating asparagine in their diet. Because I also know other things like vegetables are actually very good for us in hundreds of papers that are out there, and it never discriminated against asparagus with asparagine in it. I also know that it's important to have good gut health, and a lot of asparagine-rich foods have a lot of fiber in them that are good for good gut health. So I'm going to put all of those studies together. I'm going to put all those pieces together alongside your personal data in terms of what do you typically eat, what do you typically cook, what is your body asking for in terms of your macronutrient demands, are you balancing your blood sugar? All those other factors are going to be more important than relying on that one study. So I hope that was helpful to you and that it's going to help to release a little bit of tension and, I don't know, fear when it comes to food. I know it's so awful not knowing exactly what to eat sometimes, and having all this information thrown in front of you when it's so conflicting can be very hard to take in. But I just want to make sure that we're now considering that asking which foods are best for your cancer diagnosis is probably not the question you want to ask. Instead, you should be asking which foods are best for you, which foods are best for me, and what does my body need in order to get the most support, in order to thrive and be strong against cancer. That's really the question you want to ask yourself. And I tell you, we always get messages or emails and things like that saying, hey, Dr. Megan, I was just diagnosed with this cancer type, or I just am recovery from this cancer type. I had this treatment. What nutrition plan should I go on? And I always have to say, with like, I don't like saying it, but I have to say, is that you actually don't want me to tell you what foods to eat based on the information, because it's not going to be helpful to you whatsoever. No two people with the same diagnosis have ever gotten the same diet plan from us. What we're really focusing in on is those 3 and 4 components that we chatted about today, and they're all based on you. What's most important for you and your body to thrive after treatment? So just to recap, those 4 keys: antioxidants, phytonutrients, blood sugar balance, macronutrient demand, and then quality, including cancer-specific as well as clean types of foods. I hope that was helpful for you today. I have included some more support documents in the show notes, so you can go over and take a look at that. I have also included a couple of recipes and meal plans in there too, so you can take a little bit more of a deeper dive into the best nutrition plan for you. Thank you so much for tuning in with me. I hope to see you next week and over the next episodes to come. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Flourish After Cancer podcast. If you loved this episode, please be sure to leave a review and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Sending all my best your way, Dr. Megan.